Sooner or later you find yourself in a situation where you need to be renaming your SolidWorks files. Perhaps you realize that you have a typo in the file name, or you want to name it to something that makes more sense, or perhaps a client has a particular way that they like you to name the files. On most projects, your part files are probably part of some sort of an assembly. The one thing you absolutely do not want to do when renaming files is simply open up a Windows folder, go right to that file, right click on it, and hit rename. Let's say, for example, I realize that this is in version 2 of the fork, it's version 3, so I'm just going to rename it to version 3. And the problem is SolidWorks, when it has parts loaded into an assembly, only knows how to find those parts based on its name. Just changing one little digit in this name will cause SolidWorks to have no idea where this file is located. So this fork is part of my bike assembly. So I'm going to open the bicycle assembly now after I've changed the name of the fork. We will see what happens. Here we see the bike opens with all the parts, but it is missing the fork. And if we go over to the feature tree, we see the fork example 1_v2 is suppressed. It's because we changed the name to _v3. It doesn't know that v3 and v2 are really the same file. So let's first of all repair this damage here. I'll close the assembly without saving. I'll go back and rename this file to v2. And let's say I really want to rename it to v3. What I need to do is right click on the file and not go down to rename here, but go to the SolidWorks tab and use rename on the SolidWorks tab here. That brings up a rename document box. And what SolidWorks does is it performs a search in the same folder as the part we are changing the name of, and it looks to see where that part is being utilized. And sure enough, it shows that this part is being used in the bike assembly. You can ignore this long chain of folders here. Focus here on the bike assembly. So if I go and change the name here to v3 and hit OK, it's actually going to go up into this bike assembly file and update the information in it so that it knows that it has to now look for v3. We see v3 disappeared here. It's just ended up at the bottom of my list because it gave it a new name. Now I'm going to open up the file this time, and we see the fork is there, and we see in the list in the tree it's now looking for v3. So let's use this tool again to get an idea as to how much influence any one part can have over an entire assembly. For example, here's our bike geometry file. How many places is that being used in my assembly? If I right click on it, go to SolidWorks, rename, I see that this is actually used in 3 different places. I have that geometry file inserted into my bike assembly, it's also inserted into my bike frame, and it's also inserted into my fork. You can imagine just by changing the name of one file here, I'm going to mess myself up in 3 different places if I do it the wrong way. The right way is to change it right here in this document. The wrong way is just to use the normal rename in the Windows folder. Now this tool will only search for files that are connected together within the folder that you utilize the tool. So if we have a bike assembly that's using parts in another folder altogether, it is not going to be able to update the information in those files as well. So I recommend using this tool only when you've got your project all in one place. One way to do this perhaps is right after you do your pack and go to put your entire project into one folder. Then you can go and start renaming things without worrying that there's a file somewhere that is unaware of a name change. One other thing that people don't realize is that a drawing that has views of any parts or assemblies will not be able to show those views if a name change has been made also, because the drawing also can only know where to find the files based on their name. So if we go to this bike assembly here, which has a drawing that's being represented by here, and I again look at rename, I see that this assembly is actually being used in a drawing called bike assembly. Here we see the suffix is SLD-DRW for the drawing. Here's SLD-ASM for the assembly. If I just go and change the name of this assembly by hitting rename here, and I'll just put a 1 on this, and then I go and open up the drawing. The drawing opens up with blank views, because once again it doesn't know where to find the files to load into these views, and it'll show the views in the feature tree as suppressed. So anything that appears in a drawing, once again, you have to make sure that if you're going to rename it, use the Solidworks rename tool, not the Windows rename tool. So always rename files using the Solidworks rename tool. You'll save both you and me a lot of grief. And once again, remember, this tool only works on files that are in the same folder.